Hi, welcome to Threaded with Fibre. We're back in the garden studio, the butterfly house today, and it's very possible that my whole podcast will be made up of a series of small films. It's very warm today again, and it's very still. The air is very still, and I find that quite difficult to cope with. It dates back to an injury that I received many years ago when I was, 20, 21, something like that. And in those days I used to ride a moped, and the long and the short, this poor lady pulled out in front of me on a roundabout, and I went smack into the side of her car and hit my face along the top edge of her car. It broke my cheekbone and smashed a sinus or two. So I do find the hot weather, and particularly when it's very still, quite difficult to deal with. However, soldiering on, and so my podcast may be made up of little vignettes of stuff. We'll see how it goes. Welcome back to the podcast this week. Thank you for spending some time with me. I see there's a flurry of new viewers, so a special warm welcome to you. I hope that you get something out of this podcast. I get a lot giving, so share. Let us share. Do feel free to communicate. I'm best to catch on Instagram or the bottom of this video, because I check them and I'm notified of comments made. I have a Ravelry page and a Facebook and all of that usual malarkey, but I'm not terribly active on it. I'm usually too busy, and it's a can of worms really. You start checking them all and you lose hours and hours and hours on the internet, so I'm not prepared to give up hours and hours of internet time. It's not that I don't want to talk to you, don't get me wrong, but I'm best caught on Instagram and bottom of this video. I've got to be honest about it, and I don't want to mislead anybody. So we will move forward with some updates on my sock projects. Now I had, if you remember, 3 going. I had the last 3 pairs that were due to go into my box of socks cal that Yarngasm is doing, and these last 3 will make the 12 for the year. Needless to say, they will probably take the entire 6 months that's left of the year to make, but nonetheless, each 3 were a new project for me. And the first was, I keep looking down at them just to remind myself of where I'm going with this. I've got no show notes, nothing. It's completely ad hoc. I've just come back from the supermarket. I will go off on tangents because that's where my head is at. Stay focused, Jane. Socks. So the first one I will show you is the vanilla sock. Having never done a vanilla sock, I chose to do one just through the experience of fit from the socks I've already made. And the first sock was this one, which was using drops. Let me just get the label out. Here we go. Fable. So it was using this yarn in various colours. I'm not going to tell you the colour on this label because I can't guarantee that it's that colour, because it's a random label, I fear. But anyway, it is Drops Fable. I was very happy with the pattern. It's a uni colour to coordinate on toes, heels and cuffs, which is this little guy here. It's all in a bit of a hot mess because I've just put it down to go to the supermarket. So there we go, that was the corresponding coordinating colour, and this is the ball of main colour, which I love. It's slightly misleading, I think, because if you look at that ball of wool, for me what pops is the lime green, and so my head says that's going to be quite a light coloured sock, but in actual fact it's either quite an even balance, or because I have highlighted this contrasting colour, it's quite a dark, I think overall a dark feel to it, but nonetheless very happy with it. And to update my position on this, this morning I just did the cuff on it. I'm using 2.25mm Addies. There's the packet down here. There you go. That's the needle. I like the Addies for socks. The cable is moderately controllable. Can be a little bit pingy. And the cuff that I am producing here is a 2x2 twisted rib. I like the twisted rib. I like the texture of it. It has that kind of ridginess to it. And you can clearly see a rib visually, can't you, with the twist? So very happy with that. I've just obviously entered into the coloured segment. I'm hoping that I've worked it out right and that it will be a matching pair. I sort of guessed. I thought, okay, so when you do a long tail cast on, I have worked out in my head that is roughly 10 stitches. So I did 10, 20, 30, blah, to 64, and it appears, to be working out. I've got one row of the pink and a little bit, and then I'm into the orange and cream. And on the original sock, you're not going to be able to see it terribly clearly, but there is one row of pink with a little bit of pink and then into the orange and cream. So we'll see, won't we? Anyway, that's sock number one. Slowly but surely, it's so hot that woolly socks really don't engage the senses as well as they should do they? And I don't want to make them chores, so I will probably take a couple of months to make these 3 pairs of socks, simply because it's just so hot. So what was the second pair that I was doing? Oh, the second one was the Gumi by Berger de France Gumi 50. That's my coordinating colour. And it was matched with this guy. Very pretty. I saw this on someone's feed in Instagram and was very struck by the colours in it. So I looked it up and bought it. I picked that first, then coordinated with that. And if you remember, there was a darker shade of pinks to use up the other, what's going to be left of this after cuffs, heels and toes. So that's the yarn. And the difference with this one was that I was going to put an afterthought heel in of my own choosing. So I cast on, there's the foot, the toe, quite a deep toe. I liked the pink so much, I wanted plenty of pink in my toe. And knit up a tube and stopped. I stopped at the point I have stopped at, which is sort of that long, because I wanted to make sure that when I picked up the yarn for the second sock that I would be able to start in the same place, which left me with that much before I reached the right point in the repeat. So that's what I've got left to knit the leg. It's going to end up actually slightly longer than my usual leg, which is fine. However, because I'm not 100% sure of how much I've got left in the ball, I might have to rob Peter to pay Paul, if that makes sense. So I've stopped knitting on this one for that reason. However, I did put the heel in. And what I wanted to do was to put in the hat heel from a knitty.com pattern. So, and this was done in reverse. When you do a hat heel, you knit from the heel down, so you get bigger. Then you put your gussets on and then you carry your sock, which I will show you in the next and third sock. But this one I had to reverse the instructions. So it's been a little bit of it's not a trial. I can see it's worked and it does fit. It's a snugger fit than doing it by getting bigger. So by getting smaller, it's a snugger fit. So I've made copious notes as to what I did and where I reduced and various rows and things, and now know how to adapt and change for another pair of socks, because as I will explain later, going into the crown of the hat as opposed to coming out of the crown of the hat heel is much easier, much easier. So anyway, the other thing I had to ponder upon and put my fingers crossed and along with various other things was where to place the heel, which of course is the new part of doing this process in this sock. And I have just got it in the right place. If I'm truthful, it's very slightly short. Now that I could compensate for that by unraveling all of this heel hat and knitting it bigger. and that would give more length to the foot. So that's a possibility. However, it's okay on my left foot because my left foot is slightly smaller than my right foot. So at this stage I'm leaving it exactly as it is. However, for my other sock, when I get to start that one, which I haven't started at all yet, I will place it a little bit further down the leg, and B, I will make the heel bigger. In other words, I will cater for my larger foot. But I'm very happy with it. What I do like about it as a heel is it's very comfortable around the heel. It is made heel shaped. She's quite right, the designer of the pattern, which I have here. This is the pattern. That's my copious notes, instructions on the reverse of the written instruction. And I wish I could show you a really good picture of how it looks. It's quite difficult because I only printed in black and white, and so there really isn't a particularly good, loads of photographs, but not a particularly good one. This is a sketch, a schematic of the heel. But you get this cradle for your heel basically, and it really, in terms of putting it on your foot, it's radically different from anything else that I have made. I've done mostly, well, entirely heel flap and gusset, and I think when I first put it on, it took a little bit of adjusting. When my son, I made a pair for my son, and when he put them on, he said, oh, it feels really weird. And I said, well, what do you mean by weird? Because, you know, if you don't like it, I don't want to make you loads of hand socks and then you go, no. And he said, I can feel it's like someone's holding around my foot. The hat shape, the crown of the hat shape heel, does that, but without you being conscious of it, if that makes sense. So you're totally unaware of wearing a sock. Can't recommend it highly enough if you can make it to fit your heel. So I will definitely use it, but I want to use it as an afterthought heel as opposed to starting with it, which I'll show you why in a minute. So there we go. Very, 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 very happy with this sock visually. Just about happy in terms of its fit, and we'll definitely use it as a construction. I'm going to hold it quite close so you can see various decreases. They're all even all the way around. And once you read the instructions and reverse them, it's very easy to keep going. And what you end up with on this, looks like a big nipple, doesn't it, is you tighten up, you pull. I have chosen to take my end thread. I had 8 stitches left, so I put my thread through those 8 stitches, took them off the needles and pulled tight, so you end up just, I won't tell you the other visual image that's coming to my head right now, but I'm sure you can work it out for yourself. You tighten it up, and if you keep the thread long enough, which I didn't on this one because I didn't think of it, my plan would be to thread it through inside to reinforce and make the heel nice and strong. But I haven't done that because I may well tink out this heel and redo it when I make the adjustments on the other foot. So that was that sock, which I am more than happy to continue with. And the third and final sock was that particular Knitty.com pattern, which I'm going to now rummage through all these endless sheets of paper to find out whose pattern it was. Kathleen Sperling. Very clever lady. And you definitely have to reconsider how you lift a sock, because going back to this schematic, it's a free pattern, so I'm giving nothing for nothing. There's your heel, this piece here, which is your crown of your hat, and then you make your gussets separately by holding on to those stitches each side as open stitches, but then reattaching your yarn. So you knit up your 2 and then they join at the top, and you end up with this little cradle, which is quite cute. And then you pick up on one side and knit the toe using the toe shaping of your choice, and then you pick up on the other side of the gusset and knit your leg, which I haven't done yet. I haven't done that bit. but that's just simply picking up and knitting in the round. So here was the original sock, if you remember. It hasn't changed at all. What I will do is show you the difference in the heel. You see how much, it's really interesting how all I've done is reverse the instruction. So there's the same amount of rows in between each reduction or increase in this particular instance. So it's knit 3 rows and then increase / decrease depending on which direction you're going, then knit 3 and repeat until you either run out of stitches or you reach your required amount of stitches. And so that is your increase heel, and this is your decrease heel. But if you look now, bearing in mind there could be a tension issue because I was quite concerned about it, they are quite different in shape. This one is much broader than this one. It feels that it is. And this one is certainly deeper. I'm going to position them, and I'm going to put the blue behind so you can see the difference in shape. And yeah, I've completely reversed the instruction, so I don't quite know how that happened. Maybe it's how the stitches lie when you increase as opposed to decrease. Maybe somebody more technically minded out there will be able to give the answer to that one. So that was the foot, and I have yet to go up the leg. But I have stopped because I don't know how much yarn I'm going to have to go up the leg, because I've knit this in the same, out of the same ball of wool as I would normally do a contrasting heel. So that I've used that much extra over and above my normal, which is fine because I always end up with a little bit left over, but I just don't know yet. So I have stopped at that point and cast on for the other one, which I'm going to show you. Again, I did this bit this morning because I wanted you to see the reason why I actually prefer to decrease into the crown as opposed to increase out, because it is unbelievably fiddly. What you get as a result of this process is just about worth the fiddliness, but only just. And I did this on the hottest, one of the hottest days, so that could have a lot to do with my attitude. However, a little stitch mark is going to get in the way. Out you go, monkey. And there is, I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see with my fat fingers. Let's put that hand over there. The monkey doesn't want to stay out of it. That's the centre there. You cast on 8 stitches, 4 on each needle, and then you radiate out, increasing at various points evenly on 4 needles. And it looks spiffily do. What I do find I have to do is I have to, and hence the reason why it's fiddly, is the initial 8 stitches in the middle, the 2 centre ones can be quite loose and baggy, so I have to backtrack using my tail end. I have to backtrack and tighten them, which is quite difficult because it's a figure of 8 cast on, and so you have to work out all these wiggly ways that the stitches are lying. But as that's only 2 stitches, it doesn't take too long, and I don't tend to yank the wrong stitch, certainly not very often. And the other top tip, of course, is mark the beginning of your round, because once you get going, it's really difficult to work out which is your primary needle and which is your last of your 4. And if you get interrupted, like I'm constantly getting interrupted by various living beings in this house, I haven't got a clue where I am. Not in the pattern, but in terms of how many times have I gone around that square? So the reason why, as I say, I prefer to decrease rather than increase is entirely because it is so darn fiddly. Really fiddly. Anyway, there we go. That's the third and final sock. The yarn is Drops Fable again. I don't know the colour number. Blue. It is blue. The contrast is pink, and that is a random ball of 4-ply 100% wool that I have as a collection of bits and bobs left over from this and that. Bits and bobs and this and that. And what else can I say about it? Oh, the needles are 2.5mm DPNs. These socks will probably go away now for a few days, unless we have a break in the weather, in which case they'll come out again. But as I say, it's not really very conducive, is it, to knitting woolly socks? But nonetheless, very happy with the progress, small as it might be. And that is the sock section. I'm going to keep going. The temperature's slightly dropped for some reason. It's not cloudy in any way. So I'll keep going and I'll move on to some shawls. A couple of episodes ago, I talked about a pattern that I was gifted. And I finished that shawl and forgot to show you it last week, a fortnight ago. So I have brought that to show you. So this isn't a piece that I made this fortnight, but nonetheless, I want to show you it because it is such a pretty thing. Pretty for many reasons, not least because it was a gift and given with love, but also the yarn that I picked has made it look so pretty. So I picked, I'm not going to be able to remember any of it because it was so long ago. I tell you what, 2 episodes ago, it's all in there. It's very pink, but I picked a variegated yarn to start with, which has pink in it, so that when you reach your stripy section, the pink is introduced and increased with less impact, because I wanted it to grade, because you end up with a pink section. So if we look at this section here, is all your main colour, and then from this point we've got the pink coming in, and then you finally end up with this beautiful, simple but nonetheless effective lace edging. I could have done more. I could have just gone on and on until the ball ran out. But when I looked at it, mathematically speaking, working in thirds, the depth of the pink, because I took this point here to the end as my third, it was almost precisely. Is that contradictory? Almost precisely. Can you actually be almost precise? I don't think you put precise in, do you? So it was almost 1/3 of the entire depth of colour. So I stopped. So what I'm trying to say is my eye was balanced at that point. So I cast off. And apart from anything else, there is a lot of stitches and you had to picot them. But it's a sweet little picot, slightly different to the normal picot fashion. I'm not going to describe it because it's a paid for pattern, but they're quite nubby as opposed to great big long wobbly things. They're quite nubby and very easy to block. And so it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And it's such a pretty and delicate shawl. Very, very pleased with it. When I soaked this yarn, came out soft, almost soft enough for me to wear. Not quite because of my woolly issues, but that's issues, by the way. That's a common sign language, isn't it? Itchy wool. And nonetheless, very pretty. I'm not a pink wearer, and if anybody wears it, it'll be my daughter, or it will be gifted and pass the love on, which was how it was given in the first place. So very, very pleased that came out so beautifully. A lovely knit, really rhythmic. A great knit to do when you're watching the telly, or if you actually do want to think about something and work something through in your mind. I find it quite good as a therapy knit. I had some ups and downs emotionally in the last month or so, and a knit like this, when you're feeling ready and brave enough to think through the issues, it's a really supportive knit to do. So yeah, works on all counts, that one. What else did I do? I have finished, I finished my lefty. This is my first knit with my own hand spun, and if you look back on various issues, you'll see my crowing of my pleasure of my hand spun, and have I got the bits and bobs? Searching around, it doesn't look like I picked it up. Oh yes, I have. Stretch for it. There we go. The lefty shawl bag. And for those that need to see it as a pattern, there it is. Martina Bem's lefty. Been around a fair old while on the Ravelry popularity list. 06 2012 this pattern was put out, and quite justifiably a popular pattern. I used Addy 3mm. There we go. And my handspun, which I'm not going to labour on about again. This was John Arbon's alpaca, 100% alpaca. My cloud, soft as a cloud. Now that has no itch at all. So soft. And the 2 handspun. This was the inspiration for picking the pattern, because that screams autumn leaves to me. But I was not convinced, wrongly as it transpires, but I was not convinced that I would have enough to do the complete shawl. So I coordinated with this fondant fibre spin, which is a cranberry colourway, not as pink as the pale on the outside. Came out as a heavier spin, so this is more of a thick and thin, because it has a lot of mixed fibre in it. It does have stellina, which I am not opposed to as such, but not overly fussed about. And then there's purple and silver and gold and all sorts. But that does actually work well with the sort of the concept that I was looking for, which was autumn leaves. But it also has, I would suggest, silks and merino and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, by the look of it. Couldn't possibly describe it. It came with a drop spindle, and it was one of those, here's a bat for free, see what you make of it sort of things accompanying it. And it was a moderately easy thing to do, but I did it very early on in my spinning experience. I think it may well have been the first thing I did on my wheel. So it is a little bit slubby, but I maintained quite a good even spin on it. Whereas this one had was an incredibly easy draw, and it's merino and silk, I believe. But I do find silk quite tough to draw because of my thumb. So I've got a little bit of thick and thin going on there too. More thick than thin, whereas this is even to thick, if that makes sense. So the balance, you wouldn't put them together and knit a sheet of knitting. But as we know from the style of the shawl, you don't get much of either. And of course there's a few beads and la la. Anyway, let's look at the shawl, because that's what we're here for. So here we go. It has been blocked. And here is my falling leaves. It has quite an Egyptian feel for me, this. It has been sewn in, I just haven't cut those spares off. I sewed in as I went, and so I had a crack with that last section all in one go one evening, which to me was jolly good going when you consider there's, I would imagine, between 300 and 400 stitches on that needle by the end of it. So I did 7 leaves in one sitting, on the longest part of the shawl. So pat on the back me, thank you very much, Jane. I was impelled to finish it. Compelled? That's a better word. Compelled to finish it. So anyway, I was talking about weaving in the ends, wasn't I? They've all been woven in nicely on that neck edge, so that when you wear it and you cross it over, you won't see any loose ends. That's the theory anyway. So these loose little tags here are where I've blocked it, and now I can cut those ends off. And the cast off I chose was I'm going to have to action it because I need to visualise. Knit one, knit another, knit those two together, put that one back on the needle. No, knit another one, put those two back on. So you knit 2 and then cast off those 2. I don't think it's Jenny's. Might be. Don't know. Haven't got a clue. I did put beads in, as you know. I don't know whether the sun's so strong that it's not going to pick them up. I can see them beautifully from my side. Let's try this side. I'm sure you can't see them. Maybe you can. I'll look at that one on playback. And it's as soft as butter. And I'm really happy with it. It's not overly huge, which is fine. And I can definitely see myself, rarely, but nonetheless, having another go at this. but the slightly different concept. I would go with a much more, this is going to be an incredibly hot thing to do here. I would keep it much smaller, lose all of this, bring it round, so that you have your little tail end Charlie here. Which then affixes onto your larger space here, either with a button or a loop which you thread through. Haven't decided on that. So you end up with, let's lose all of this, quite a nice little neck piece. And I would do it, because it's quite Egyptian for me, I would pick some quite dramatic colour choices, like possibly black and white, which is of course deco, or maybe some navy blue in there and cream, or something with gold in it. Yeah, so that would be, as I say, quite a rare thing for me to repeat something, but nonetheless I quite like the idea of that being quite a nice piece for in a jacket. Or you could, I suppose, technically go really quite dark, steel greys maybe, and make it for a man. Take the beads out. I don't see why a man wouldn't wear that inside a collar of a jacket. So there we go, finished, completed. Now I'm going to take a pause here because A, I'll need some fresh air, B, I have a cup of tea that I'm going to sip, and C, the amulet. So I'll see you shortly. Okay, so hi again. I've had a little playback of what I've done so far, and I'm aware there's a little bit of issue with the changes in lighting, so as much as I can apologise for it, there is absolutely nothing I can do to make it different. The sun is tracking its way around the garden now, and we are very close for it to be full into the door. So the other thing I'm aware of is that I am talking quite quickly because I want to try and get this done before the sun whacks straight through the door. So I apologise for that as well. And of course, because it is so hot, feeling a bit flustered. Deep breath, deep breath. Right, so I'm drinking mint tea, by the way, which is hot, but actually I find hot mint tea quite refreshing on a hot day, and it's very thirst quenching. So I will pop that down there. The amulet, the second shawl from the Shawl Society. Now, the first one for me went like a dream, and ever honest, it was not totally challenging. There was a lot of straight knitting, little stitching thrown in here and there, and the picot ending. As much as I love the whole effect, I found an easy knit to do and enjoyed it thoroughly, not least because of the yarn choice, but nonetheless I tend to pick things that offer a challenge of some sort for me as a knitter. The amulet, now this on paper seemed not particularly challenging, however this one threw up towards the end a real challenge, and a challenge more to my patience and enduring love of fibre stuff, to be honest, because there was a point last night where I thought, you know what, I might just pop that one on the naughty step. However, because I wanted to include it on the podcast, because what I was seeing as I was knitting, I'm absolutely, totally happy with, I pushed myself and finished it and soaked and blocked it last night for you today. You are definitely the reason why. Let me talk about the choices that I made for this yarn, this shawl. My basket has a plastic bag lining to it, and it's a bit crinkly, so that's the noise you're hearing. These are the two yarns that I picked in terms of colour. For me, amulet spoke of something quite Celtic and metallic. I wear a copper bracelet because of my rheumatism, which I highly recommend, and I have 2 or 3 in various patterns. One is a lovely thick copper band that was my great-grandmother's, and so the title amulet was something quite earthy and quite strong. That's what was talking to me. So I picked these colours because I felt they had an element of nature to them in terms of the earth and metallic ore colours, but also they were very complementary of each other, as you will see. And these particular yarns are, so that multicoloured one is Rowan Fine Art, which is a premium hand-painted sock yarn made with merino wool, kid mohair and mulberry silk, and it is divine. I have got to say, I have several of these balls of yarn in various shades. This particular one is called Chiff Chaff, made in South Africa. And in your 100-gram ball, you get 400 metres, which has proven to be more than adequate, because that's what I have left. I could weigh that, but let's guess. I like to guess. You'll get the real weight along the bottom of the screen. I'm going to say that there is 20 grams. I have no idea. Could be completely wrong there. Anyway, plenty. Not enough for a pair of socks, but enough for part of something. Maybe some cuffs on some mittens, because the other yarn was Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Mochatonal. That's my favourite. Right, that was a bit of a break for me because that was an important phone call I had to take, so apologies for that. We were talking about the amulet, weren't we? And I haven't even shown you it yet. The yarn. We were talking about the yarn. So there we go. It was the Rowan Chiff Chaff and the Knit Picks Stroll Fingering Mochatonal. And this is a hand-painted fingering weight yarn. And we have 100 grams, which gives me 462 yards. I can't convert exactly, but that's 420 metres, a bit more. 75% merino, 25% nylon. A soft yarn, quite plumptious. Not as soft as this one, and more plump. So this is softer and finer. This is just as, it's nicely soft but plumper. So I was a little nervous about, the comparison I'm making, was a little nervous about their weight working together. Quite a lot more left of this one. I reckon there's probably 25 plus grams here. And it comes across as a fatter yarn, so I thought it might be a little bit bulky against this one. However, the way the pattern works, you don't see it as a problem. Let me show you. Let me show you my amulet. I put beads in. I did my usual favourites. Where are they, little devils? They're in here somewhere. I keep them in here when I'm working with them. It's just a tin, because I can tip in and out rather than open the bag up and then have this tendency to go ping. Beads everywhere. I am quite sure that we will discover beads hither and yon in the house and in the studio. But anyway, that's the beads I used. I went through a whole packet plus about 50 more from a second packet. I don't know how many you get in a packet. Several hundred. So it's a bit of a bead eater, but needs to be. And so, fresh off the blocks, as they say. It's this beautifully fine, quite well blocked, quite, I won't say aggressive. It was there was no forcing it. But there it is. That's Django. Or is that Willow? Willow. Is she going to come and say hello? She can probably hear me talking and wondering who I'm with. So there we are. You can see the bead section here. It's quite heavy. That was the bead eater, this section. It ate quite a lot of beads. And it runs down through to the lacy section, which has a little line of beads to there. Now I've blocked it with quite a large pull, so we get a nice arch. I've seen the picture that comes on the pattern. It was quite flat, this line, and I liked the contours. So I was very tempted to fiddle around with the lacy pattern at the end and add a couple of extra rows. However, I'll come on to why I didn't in a minute. You can see by the blocking, and if I hold it nice and close, there really isn't any concern for me to worry about the difference in the yarn thicknesses. Very cleverly and serendipity like, the lace sections are the fatter yarn, so in the blocking they're less dense. The denseness comes in the garter and the ribbing, if you can call it dense. You can see through it, it's so fine, and look at the movement in that, it's just wonderful, beautifully soft. I would 100% be able to wear that, no question, and indeed would wear it. I'm going to hold it up in front of me because I can see through it, so I can see what you can see. It is huge. Let's have a look. Half a shawl is, yes, 1 metre, and that, so 3 metres I would say on that top line. And the depth, what should we say, nearly 1 metre. Oh, 1 metre. 1 metre deep. I love that centre spine. Those of you that have already done it will revel in its beauty too. That has an almost animalistic feel to it. It's quite skeletal in its style. Really, really nice. I made a small modification. I think I discussed it the first time I showed the shawl. Was it last week? Last fortnight. On the yarn over, with your 3-stitch and then your yarn over and then your pattern. It's quite common in terms of increase on a shawl, triangular shawl, and you end up with this quite large space between your effectively garter rib and your pattern shawl. And I have no problem with that, but I wanted to try something different, inspired by the cardigan raglan, if you remember. And so what you get through doing that, which you knit through the back of your yarn over as opposed to knitting your yarn over, so you give it more structure, is much smaller spaces. Now you can see them if I pull against them, but you can also quite clearly see that firm structure line running underneath them, so that when you wear your shawl they've almost disappeared. Maintained pretty much. There's a couple of areas there where they're slightly larger on the lace, but as they're in a lace section, you know, visually it doesn't impact at all. They generally maintain quite a nice line all the way down. And the reason why I didn't add my few extra layers, and why this nearly ended up on the naughty step, I made a mistake, which I have actually no idea how I made the mistake, but what I ended up with in this section here, I ended up with an extra stitch, and it was, let me just work out which section it was. I can tell you exactly which section it was. It was that section, so it was 3 pattern repeats past that centre point, and I was merrily knitting along. You don't pick it up on the purl row because that's just a complete purl row, so I'm merrily knitting along the pattern, and then I did that section and thought that's not in the right place, so I went back and did it again. Nope, that is still causing this next pattern to come out in the wrong place. So when I was placing my bead, it was the bead placing row, the bead wasn't lining up with the rest of them. Oh, poop, something's definitely gone wrong there. So I thought I could tink back that little section there. So I pulled up my needles and just pulled out those stitches carefully and tinked back down to about just above that V point there and re-knit them within themselves. However, that's easier said than done. And I couldn't get, not only could I not get the pattern to form in the right place, because it was an extra stitch and I had to reduce it down, I had baggy wool there. So you were ending up with stitches that were oversized. Now sometimes you can lose that, particularly in a section where you've got yarn overs, because you can just lose them within those loops and eventually they just sort of jiggle into themselves. But A, I was talking about 3 or 4 rows of baggy stitches, and B, I just couldn't get the pattern to lie in the right place. So my only recourse was to tink back 2.5 rows to that point there, and I discovered my mistake and corrected it. But that meant tinking back over 1,000 stitches, and it was about 8:30 in the evening, and I would have finished that shawl by 9 if I hadn't made that mistake. So I was not well pleased. However, I did that and put it on the blocking mats last night, and this morning when I took it off I thought, you know what, there's nothing naughty about you whatsoever. You are deliciously light and you will be a pleasure to wear. You can feel that silk in there. Oh, so pleased with it. Really, really pretty. Pretty, pretty, pretty. Clever design. Can't wait to see what number 3 will be. And I had both those yarns in my stash, so I didn't go out and buy anything. Serendipity again. You were bought for this shawl, my friend. Has an almost Victorian feel to it. I think it's that style of lace. That reminds me, what about anybody else? I'm going to turn it up the other way to explain the reason why. It reminds me of stained glass church windows. Little arch windows. So there we go. A shawl finished. What else have I got that's knitting? I can catch you up. The only other thing that I've done, and I haven't done it in the last couple of days, but nonetheless I have, is the cardigan. And I won't go into huge detail. If you want to know the ins and outs of the yarn choice, etc., do look back. But just suffice to say that it's pootling along. I have, not quite sure I'm actually going to be able to show this. I have got well past the sleeve entrance there. You need 7 inches and I'm at 5 inches, so I've got a couple more inches to do, and then you short row increase at the backs and then come the lace panel. The change I have made for this cardigan is originally my choice of yarn for the lacing was this yarn in a different colourway, a much greyer colour palette, to give some nice contrast. I dodged the sun now, it's really coming round. That's because that phone call's put me off. I'll sit back. I apologise for the sun, chaps, sorry. However, I've changed it because this yarn is knitting up with this quite crinkly boucle feel to it. I didn't think that would sit well with lace. I can't see it doing lace justice, so I have changed my choice there, and I have opted for Artisano alpaca silk lace, and the colour is cherry red, and it's 70% alpaca, 30% silk, and you get 400 metres in a skein, and I need 2 to finish the cardigan. And if I hold it up, it's tonally good. It's not a colour match in any of these colours. I might have to just bring it out the sun to show you. Let's hold it under there. But you can see tonally it's going to fit in there. So the lower section of the arm, the lower third of the arms and the lower third of the body is a lace pattern, which I will do in this yarn. I may be able to show you a picture. I believe it's a black and white picture, but it will certainly give you a feel. And I'll remind you again what the cardigan is. It is called the Talus cardigan. I believe I paid for it, so I can't show you the pattern, but I can show you this picture, which I only discovered after a little bit of rummaging around, looking for other parts of the instruction. So what we've got here, hopefully that will give you a good picture. So I am working on this section here, which has a kind of a boucle feel to it. It's a collared neck, hence the hap connection. The back drops down lower at the back than the front line. So there's the front line which drops down, and then you fill in the space with this lace. And on the sleeve as well. So that will be that plain red. Largely because of the fact that the yarn has a boucle feel to it. That's really the driving reason why I changed it. So that will be something to sort of share as time goes on. I dipped in and out of that, and then the amulet shawl came along and got totally put on the back burner, which is fine. What else have I been working on? I've done some crochet for the stall. I Instagrammed this item. I did this in the Sunday after the last podcast, and I used, excuse me, reaching out of screen, this. I had this. I've had it for a long time. I have 3 cones of it, and it's quite a rough. It's a wool. I have no idea any more than that. I was given it. It's not string, but you wouldn't wear something with it. And when I was given it, my first thought was it reminded me of string shopping bags. That's what I saw in it. However, once I started to use it, the material it made was much softer and much more forgiving. Now, this is going to make a noise. I'm going to slightly turn the camera because I want to try and cut the sun off. So let's see what happens. That's my hand going over the recording screen. That might work. Let's see. If it doesn't work, I'll re-record that section. Anyway, here is how it came out. You can see from the way I'm handling it, it's come out quite soft. It's incredibly strong. I want to use the word jute, but as I don't really know what jute is like, it's probably not jute. I kind of winged it with its shape and style. I start by crocheting that base shape in a sort of a lozenge shape, and then you just come up the body, increasing slightly on what would be effectively the corners, slightly off the corners, so you end up with a sort of a baggy effect. If I were to draw a straight line where the increases are here and here, there's more space on this dimension than there is on that dimension. And it's done in what the American term is a single crochet. I don't know what the British terms are. I only use American terms for crochet. So I can tell you in American terms it's a single crochet, and you crochet through the back loop only to get that ridge effect, which I quite like. But I also quite like the effect from the reverse, which has a kind of a oatmeal-y effect, like little pieces of oatmeal. However, that's the inside and that's the outside on this occasion. And then across the top I did a back crochet stitch, so you work the reverse direction, and I do like that. It's almost whip stitchy. There is again a proper technical name for it which escapes me at this precise moment in time, but I do like it, and it gives that top line a little bit more strength and durability. The fastening, everything's pinned on at the moment because I'm not 100% sure about the handles yet. So the fastening is a loop which will be affixed permanently on one side, and then obviously there's a buttonhole there, and it's all done with one length of thread. There's no breaking and refastening, so that it will be nice and strong. That is my tail end just yet to thread through there, and it loops over the button, which is not properly fixed yet, but it is a very large resin flower, which is actually part of a beading jewellery piece. Look at me right in the sun. I'm going to literally be sunned right out of this room in a minute. I'm going to have to speed it along a bit. Okay, so the handles they are made again from the same, this is what I'm not 100% sure of yet. I'm going to just live with them for a bit. I chained a long length and then doubled it, and that's the core of the handle. And then I overstitched with a single crochet, which forms that top edge, and then looped around the sort of the rope chain inside, forming these attachment tabs as I went. And then this pink is top crocheting, which you'll understand if you've made something like Sophie's Universe, or there are lots of patterns that do it. Using a hook, you just do a chain stitch on the surface of your work. And I chose pink because the fabric that I will line it with, which at the moment is covered with things I can't show you, is pink and floral, hence the button as well. It obviously still has to be lined. I stopped doing that because it just got so hot in the studio. The sewing stuff is set up in here and it was too hot. However, that went up very quickly, so I'll do 2 or 3 of those for the stall. And running parallel to those, I also started this chap. This will be a messenger bag style. I have no idea what this yarn is. It literally came as a package. I had half a dozen of these. I suspect, there's certainly wool in there, and I suspect there's a viscose mix to it. It's not very elastic, very plump and very, very soft, but there's not any stretch in there at all. So it could be alpaca and silk. Got it a while ago, I really can't remember. But I love the effect that I'm getting. I'm doing a faux basket weave, which is to, again, single crochet, which is why they take so long. But I'm using quite a thick hook, 6mm hook, and it's quite tiring on the hands. So through one stitch you go through both loops, and then the next stitch you do the back loop, and you do that alternate all the way around. And then when you do your next level, you like a moss stitch, you then skip it over to the next space. So above the stitch that went through both loops, you only do a half. So you end up with, that's your front of where you've only done crocheted into the back loop, that's the front loop. But at the next stitch up, you've used both loops, and then you go back to your half loop and your both loops. So you end up with this kind of textured finish, which I do like. So if you compare it to the bottom, where you get the parallel lines where you do every stitch through the back loop, this one you end up with a basket stitch, and on the inside it's very similar because it's just the reverse really. So that is hoping to be a sort of a messenger style bag. However, once I got into that, I did think, in my creative mind running riot with me, but wouldn't it be fun to do a knitting project bag from real knitting, or crochet in this particular instance? So I've come up with 2 concepts which you will share in their development of. The first one involved, I can't reach it, but it involved crocheting over real rope, and has given me so far this. A little bit wonky because it's been sat idle. It needs to bed into itself because the rope has been long wrapped in a particular shape. Now, in order to relax it, I would have to soak it, and life's too short. So we have a little bit of a wibbly wobbly effect, but actually I think that's quite part of its charm. And so the concept here is that's my hard third, if you like, of my project bag. So you have effectively a yarn bowl. However, in order to make it a project bag, my next stage is to put a band of patterned crochet, stitch patterned crochet, and on this instance I'm going to do paisley. Now I have a small sample of the sort of thing I have in mind. It won't exactly be this. This is a little bit more ornate than my idea. However, what I will do is a series of lines with using a paisley style as a next level. And then the top section will be fabric. Now you can see me searching. Here it is. I have my chosen fabric, and this is why I picked the paisley pattern, is because the lining is paisley. What else? I had, by pure chance, I picked the orange and brown yarns. They're cotton, 100% cotton. And then found fabric that was just a perfect match for it. So there we go. This is the lining that I have chosen. So I will give you a rough idea of how my concept hopefully will fall into place. So we have our inner sock like this. This spare section, there's enough there to form a fitted base to it. So I will cut a circle and stitch it to the tube. And that will sit inside the yarn mold. So we do love a plan. Let's hope it comes together. So that will sit like that. And then you have your crochet effect band here. The lining is then fixed to that top band. And I will have a drawstring tube. I have a coordinating fabric, which I will possibly put the base in. I haven't decided that yet, but will also form the tube for the drawstring. And so you will close your knitting bag up, so. And then when you want to use it, you will fold down your softer part and have a yarn ball. Ta-da! Now in my head, can you see it? That is a really good idea. So we'll see. It took me about 3 hours to do that lower half. And then, as I say, I had to come out of the room because it was too hot. So that's the second concept going on. And then the third one, which I have Instagrammed slightly, is this guy. Using a much smaller hook. I am using a 3mm Addy. I do like this style of hook. It really, ergonomically, it suits my hand. But I have done so much crochet I've had to stop because my left wrist is going a little numb. So I've put that one on hold for a bit. This is using drops. It's not Farble. I don't know what the... Drops Delight. There you go. I think this colour is 11, but I have several balls of it, so it very well may be something completely different. See, I'm totally off screen just to avoid that sun. Sorry about that. Hey ho. What have we got here? 50 grams. 175 metres. It's on a crease, so I wasn't sure that was 75 or 175. 175 metres. And so we're looking at, what are we looking at here? We are looking at 75% wool and 25% polyamide. Drops Delight. Really pretty. As you can see, it's a multicoloured ball of wool. And what I have got out of it thus far, give myself a tail, is a square version of the round one. This is much softer. This is much more tactile. And this is where my sort of creativeness has free rein and possibly ends up going absolutely nowhere, because what I end up with, although I may look at it and go, oh, I love how that looks, has no practical function whatsoever. However, I am pursuing this as a concept because I think it might work. I think. So again, I crocheted my base. This needs some work in terms of initial start. This particular one here, the difference between the two effectively, this one, I chained a length and then went backwards and forwards in rows. Whereas this one, I chained a much smaller length and then went around and around, creating corners and enlarging. So you have to, I had to be really careful to make sure I got my increases in the right place, and there's one or two areas where I thought, okay, it's looks a little baggy there. However, I remedied that using a technique that I have used before, and I have the piece somewhere, and I will pull it out one day and show you, because it is a wonder to behold, because it is totally an indulgence in the technique as opposed to any hope of creating a useful object. And it's based on the sashiko darning sewing style, in that you have tight, you can probably just make them out, little stitches. However, it is also using a woven effect so that they sit in alternate places, and you end up with this really quite firm fabric. So as you can see, I've done that section there. So this is really quite soft and flippy floppy, and this has quite, it's not rigid by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt that it was creating a really nice fabric for the base of the work basket or project bag or whatever else you might want to term it when it's finished. So that was giving me a nice base. Then I wanted to reinforce the edges, so I have again, hello Django. Oh no, you have to say hello, because I know there are several people out there who are totally in love with you. This, say hello to Django. He is, yes, you good boy. No, don't lick my mouth. Who are you barking at? Who are you telling me had called? The children have. Is that what it is? You don't like looking at yourself, do you? He discovered the bedroom mirror this morning. It was quite funny. He was quite perturbed, but there should be another him on the planet, whereas actually I am the most important thing on the planet. How dare there be? And then he was torn with that whole concept of somebody being, you know, tough and taking over my space, with, actually, you are a very nice looking young man. Weren't you? You were torn with that. You didn't know what to do with yourself. So in the end you jumped on the bed and troughed, which he does doing a lot. I've had put some fondant fibre hand cream on last night before I went to bed, and he liked the smell, so he came over, so I gave him a good old like that. There's nothing left on my hands but the smell, and he spent at least 10 minutes rubbing his face up and down the bed trying to get the smell off. It's quite funny. Yeah. So that's our Django Bango Boo. You're going to go back in the house now. We like your eyebrows, don't we? There they are. Look at those eyebrows. Pet moment. There will be, hopefully, you'll either have already seen it because I put it on the beginning, or you've yet to come. I put it on the end. Willow, as promised from last time. Go on, off you go, darling. Don't knock the camera. Yes, lovely. Go on, off you go. Willow doing her party pieces. Right. After that dog interruption, talking about this, wasn't I? Yes, so I backstitched around the edge to provide the base, defined the edge, I suppose. That's the dog knocking the bag. And then come up the sides, and I am again doing that basket weave effect in this panel, and then I have got the lines of the previous bag in that section, and now I've gone back to basket weave there, and I will work up a section. I'm thinking about that much. And then my top line is going to be, it's called butterfly stitch, and it's quite an airy, loose, airy stitch, so you'll be able to see through it. So that when I line it, the top section will be folded over, so you can see the lining pattern from the outside. I hope that makes sense visually. I hope you can visualise that the same as I can. So you won't see the lining like you will this one. The lining is integral to this one, whereas the lining is just the same as any other project bag in terms of its purpose. Is when you open your bag, oh, isn't that pretty? However, you will get little glimpses of it with this top section being of a lacy nature. I may do a series of tiny granny squares. I haven't quite decided yet. It depends on how well the sides hold up. Because once I've done these series of sections alternating, my plan in this section here is to repeat the woven effect that I've put on the base, so that I give it some structure. That's the plan. Now that bit I may omit, because before I do that I'm going to sort of attach the lining and see if the lining does the job. Because at the moment it would be very much likened to an unlined project bag. So putting lining in, which will have a very light interfacing, may well provide all that's needed. But we have a very interesting project bag concept going on, I think, and although there won't be a huge amount of them because they are time consuming, but then everything that I do is time consuming in terms of that. I don't punch them out. I can't do it that way. I have really tried to get my head into the must make lots concept. When I did this bag, which I did in a day, I thought, oh, I can make loads of those for the stall. I can do them in a day. I've got 4 weeks. Imagine how many I can make. And then reality stepped in, and I just don't have that much of that yarn, for want of a better word. And I have no idea where to get anything like it because I wouldn't know what I was asking for. And B, just I can't repeat myself that often. So I would have to change it enough for it to feel like a different experience. And then that might add time, and anyway, so that was never going to happen. So I might make 3 or 4 at the most. 2. let's be real here, Jane. 2. So that's my crocheting. And I've pretty much covered it. I did a bit of spinning for Tour de Fleece. I managed to finish the fondant fibre fuzzlings, which were sea glass was their name, and my goal was to beat the 300 metre mark, if you remember, and I have managed to get 390. Round of applause for me. The spin is one of the most even that I have done. The plying, apart from 1 or 2 patches, and literally I can count them on one hand, the plying is also really even. I mean, I would consider this to be a huge leap forward in my abilities, and I put that entirely down to spinning every single day. So if you are planning to take spinning on as a new adventure, whether that be through a drop spindle or a wheel, this is done on the wheel, do a small bit every day. I've managed so far, apart from a couple of days where it was less time, but nonetheless I did spin, I managed to do an hour. On a couple of days it was an hour long, but that was quite taxing on my hands. But during the day I've managed to do an hour pretty much every day since the Tour de Fleece started. And I put that discipline down as the reason why I have managed to achieve that even a spin. So that inspired me to continue with the spin, and I picked up a Spin City bat. Now, I was entirely enabled into this purchase some time ago by Jilly of the Knitting Broomstick. It popped up, she was talking about some purchases she made, and I wasn't particularly in need of fibre, but the colour of it caught my eye. And then she said it was a British company, and it's quite hard to get really nice stuff. I say hard, it probably isn't. I'm not a huge buyer, so it probably is nowhere near as hard as I believe it to be. However, I have bought from America, and 3 times now, on every occasion, I have been massively stung by customs and handling. And I mean seriously, to the point where the purchases were no longer financially sensible purchases. So unless it is something extremely special at an amazing price, and therefore the customs and handling just make it real, I won't buy in America anymore. I'm so sorry, my American viewers, for that. And it is the blame it's not blame really, my ill will is directed towards the handling charge. Customs are customs are customs, you know. Somebody somewhere has decided that this thing coming into the country will not be allowed unless you pay that. I can't argue it either way. But you still have to put it in through the postal system. So why add extra on when you've paid postage? I just cannot get my head around it. Anyway, I digress slightly onto a bit of a soapbox moment. So I am spinning using this Spin City fibre. This is the fibre I'm working with. And this is what I have left of half the 100 gram roving. I think that's what you called it. So this is half of it. And I was going to guess at the name. There's something, it's something to do with unicorns. That's all I can tell you. I think. Or fairies. Something like that. And I liked the mix of grey with the purple. Now, having now experienced enough spinning in my style of spin, I don't do any fancy splitting and dividing. I have done on a couple of occasions. I have one up there that I haven't knit with yet because I have a second bat to do to make up a full user's worth, and I divided that in a particular way because I wanted a particular effect. However, my general method of draw is to just take it off and spin as it comes, and that's certainly what I did with this one. I just spun it as it came, and I'm very happy with the way the colours play with each other. It definitely does look like something from, and I mean this in a good way, it looks like something from the sea. Very Mediterranean, quite Greek. So this is what's left of my first half, and I've split it because initially I was going to ply it to itself. However, what I'm getting from it is incredibly fine. There is silk in this, but it's not, she's prepped it in a way that the draw is still really easy to do. I don't know how she's done it. She must have combed really well. There are no clumps of silk. I think that's probably what it is, or very few clumps. It's a little bit too much purple stellina for my taste, so I'm letting that fall as I spin. Obviously some of it's staying. So what I'm getting out of it, I've taken it off the wheel to show you, is this. And it's my little finger, cobweb weight. I don't really want to unravel too much because you lose the tension on the spin. But that end bit's unravelled slightly, so it's not true to. But look how fine that is. I am so pleased with it, and on top of it being so very, very fine, it's a very even spin. So it inspired me to think, I'm going to get a really nice, long, fine yarn from this. And then I got myself a pattern book and fell in love with a pattern that uses a fingering weight, sock weight. And if I applied this to itself, I wouldn't have enough. But if I applied it with a lace weight, and I have a grey, soft grey drops lace weight, which is alpaca, and will grip nicely against this, I should, in the skein, I believe there is 800 metres. What I'm hoping for is if I apply what I get out of this 100 gram roving, I don't really know what you call it, roving, I should get 800 metres. So that will give me 800 metres of this grey and purple ply, and then I buy a second grey, knit it double to finish off the pattern, so that the edging will have plain grey, the grey that's plied into this. I need to show you the pattern for you to quite get the concept, really. So I do have the book. Bear with. Bear with. Get the right book. I bought 3 books on a whim, and I'm not quite sure which book's it is in. No, I don't think it's in that one. I think it might be this one. Free Spirit Knits. Let's try this one. If it's not in this one, we'll look at another one. I bought this book, and as I'm flicking through it, thinking, I hope I like, it kind of just came up as a suggestion. And you know that look inside me thing, and you think, okay, there's probably enough in there. There was enough in there for me to go, yep, yep, ooh, yep, ooh, yep. And I'm flicking through it, and I came across this particular pattern. I hope it's in this book. Otherwise, transpose that explanation to the next book until we get the right one. But there are lots in here. Excuse me flicking. This has a particularly good range of shawls and hats. After all of that, it may not even be the right book. I thought it was. I think this is it. Yes. Three Sisters shawl. Right, are you ready for this? Oh, so beautiful. Look at that. And you see it? Am I getting a good view? Because of course I can't see now. And what I hate doing this to books, bending them backwards. Excuse me, book. I apologise. You see this section here, which looks to me like an applied edging. I would do that, assuming the numbers work, in the plain grey, and then all this body in my homespun applied to the drops grey. So watch this space for that project. I do like the shape of it. There it is on the back. I like the construction of it. So, great book. And we're just going to transgress slowly into the last thing I want to talk about, which are purchasing. I don't want to enable people, but I would highly recommend all three books for three different reasons. That one has a lot of accessories. It has a lot of hats and shawls, and it's quite it has a Native American feel to it in some respects. If you look at, for instance, this shawl or wrap, Santa Fe, it has quite a Native American feel to it, like an Indian blanket. And there is another one that even more so, it's a coat. And I looked at it and thought, yep, I would wear that in a trice. It's a kind of a prairie feel to it. I think that's a good way of describing it. A lot of that has to do with the aesthetic of the book. However, there's no getting away from the message being sent by that. And I would 100% love to wear that. But that would be a labour of love, wouldn't it? Grand Canyon coat. Yeah, so that was that book. Really, really looking forward to that. Then this was the second book, which was called Refined Knits by Jennifer Wood. And she describes it as a sophisticated lace, cable and Aran lace knitwear. This one is mostly about garments. One or two shawls, one or two small accessories. I think there's a hat and gloves here and there. But quite stunning in their stylings. And I think there are some very interesting shapes to achieve here. That one I've just shown you, for instance. And there is another couple where the shape of the garment or the stitching applied. This is a back view of a jacket, which I would knit longer personally, but nonetheless is very interesting. And then that little top there is interesting with its drop neckline, large waist to hip patterning there. So again, if you see this one and think, is there enough in there for me to pick it up? I would say 100%. If you're into garment knitting, that one is a must. I haven't looked at the way the patterns are written, but what they're offering in terms of styling, beautiful. And then the reason why I bought books in the first place was because I was watching Lorelei Urto, who does Knits and Beads, I think that's her podcast, and she had done this really sweet hat. And I thought, oh, I love that hat. I would love to do it. If not for me, then for my daughter, because she's great in hats. So I went online for that book, and it is this book, of course. Now I'm quite sure that I'm quite late to the party on this one. And in fact, I also ordered Botanicals 2. Botanical Knits 2, because they're second-hand books and they were a bargain price. Oh well, might as well get them both. I'm just trying to find the hat. I'm sure there's an index which would make it much quicker. Why don't we do the sensible option, Jane? Now, if you watch Lorelei's podcast, you'll know the hat I mean. And it is called Oak Trail. There it is. It has this little leaf detailing to the side and on the back. There it is. Nice scoop down on the neck. So, if I don't wear it for myself, the older I get, the less inclined I am to wear hats. It has a lot to do with fuffing around with my hair. I've shed a lot of hair of late, and that's why I pull away from hats. However, my daughter would look a dream in that. Her young face poking out from under there. So that was the reason why I bought that book. And again, it's got a lot of accessories in it. Hats, gloves, scarves, and 1 or 2 jumpers, jackets. That looks interesting. I look at patterns and I look for construction and knitting techniques because I'm all about the process. So that kind of brings it to a close in terms of knitting and progress and this and that. I will finish with something that has got me interested because of my 5 fleece gift. I talked about it last episode. I was gifted 5 fleece for those that are new and haven't looked back. And they're Suffolk mixed breed. And this is another reason why not an awful lot of work here to show you, and certainly nothing very much completed, because I have spent the last 2 weeks cold soaking 5 fleece. And each fleece was divided by 4, and then the 5th was the raggedy ends around the edges. And each section had to be cold soaked twice. So that's 8 buckets of water, and I soaked them for 2 hours each time. And then the 5th section, which was the really grubby, gungy bit, they sat overnight sections. And that in itself, technically speaking, theoretically, it wouldn't take too long. However, you've got to dry it all in between. And I have an area, and I bought a second very simple area to spread the fleece out to dry. It's been pretty much glorious weather, 2 or 3 days scattered here and there of rain, but fortunately fell on my drying days, so I soaked and dried alternately. I think there were a couple of days where I had to do 2 drying days because I just couldn't catch up. And so my house has smelt from wet sheep a lot. It's not an unpleasant smell, but when you shut up for the night and the fleece essentially dry until you squeeze it and then you feel the dampness in it, you shut them up in the living room, and when you get up in the morning, the living room has a distinct odour, which, the dogs were very keen, and occasionally came in with clumps of wool hanging out, and there's bits of wool blowing around all over the garden, which is fine. I've just left it to blow because the birds will pick it up and use it in their nests and what have you, and it will break down into the soil. However, what I was getting from the experience was very soft hands, considering my hands were in and out of water constantly for 2 weeks, squeezing and what have you. My skin has never been so soft, and that's why I was applying hand lotion last night, because I haven't been soaking and squeezing out these fleece for 2 or 3 days now, and so their hands were going back to being quite dry, particularly down here. And of course it's the lanolin. A cold soak won't break down the lanolin entirely, but because I'm manipulating and handling the fleece, gently squeezing out excess water, etc., certain amounts of lanolin are coming out in the water and indeed being absorbed into the skin. So I have very soft hands. And I got interested in lanolin. And so to finish this week's podcast, I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about what I found out that intrigued me.
So first of all, the definition of lanolin, and excuse me for not looking at you while I talk because I'm going to crib off my notes to get it right, really. The definition of lanolin is a fatty substance found naturally on sheep's wool. It is extracted as a yellowish viscous mixture of esters. So my first thought was, what are esters? And it's quite a chemistry description, which I won't go into, but basically in as simplistic terms as my research will allow me to do, and Tilly, I reckon you'll be well in the know on this one, it's something that's reacting an alcohol with an organic acid, and it's a chemistry process to get these esters. And they use it in perfume, cosmetics. We all know where you find lanolin, soap, all that sort of thing. So lanolin, it's also been known as wool wax or wool grease. Now, I would imagine that they are terms of the trade, or possibly terms from way back. It's secreted by the sebaceous glands of wool-bearing animals. So obviously lanolin would be found on alpaca fleece, what else? Would you say, I'm not sure you'd say Angora, you might say mohair from a goat. Lanolin is used by humans and comes from domestic sheep breeds raised specifically for their coat. However, it's a misnomer to call them wool fat because it is not actually a true fat. And again, that will be more of a chemical explanation to that. It has waterproofing properties, obviously, because it keeps the sheep from being completely bogged down by wool. When I was soaking the fleeces, my daughter came out to watch on a couple of occasions, and as you pick up this wet lump of fleece and the water streaming off it, it goes from being something really quite laborious to not lifting a cloud. I'd never describe it as that light, but the difference is quite visually obvious as the water drains out. And it helps her to visualize that without lanolin, the poor sheep would be carrying this heavy weight around. So the lanolin stops the water from not just penetrating the fibres of the fleece, but reaching the animal itself, and if it's not been shorn recently, because that would be quite a barrier, wouldn't it? So it helps the sheep to shed water from their fleece. Its role in nature is to protect the wool and the skin against the ravages of the climate and the environment. So it has a tendency to cause the fleece to get quite lumpy and claggy. So you're not going to get penetration from brambles, and small objects will work their way through, of course, but it would protect the sheep, particularly if you think about sheep in Wales, where they are roaming quite craggy, rocky environment. I would imagine that would offer quite a lot of protection. It's a waste product in the wool processing industry. So I suppose when you think about all of these superwash wools, all of that lanolin in that first part of the process, where does it go? What do they do with it? No idea. That would be an interesting thing to find out. It has antifungal and bacterial properties. So you are going to find that the biggest industries that take on lanolin are the pharmaceutical and the cosmetic industries. So it readily forms an emulsion with water that can be absorbed by the skin to soften and help prevent drying and cracking. Hence, it's often found in hand cream, and anything lanolin based you're going to be able to absorb beautifully into your skin, and it really will have huge benefits. And so I wanted to find out, historically speaking, what in history is there to show how lanolin has benefited sheep farmers or anyone who is involved in that animal world. And the earliest examples date back 8,000 years, and there is evidence that shows ancient Egyptians placed a block of lanolin on their head like that, sat in the sun, and as it melted, it was quite slowly melting, it fell down into their faces and was slowly absorbed. So it softened and protected the skin of the ancient Egyptians, which I thought was fascinating. Not that I would particularly want to sit with a lump of lanolin on my head, but I might look 20 years younger. And on that note, I thank you for joining me. I hope that your fortnight has brought you what you wished and supported you if you hadn't achieved what you wanted. I look forward to seeing you again in a fortnight. And take care. Be kind to yourselves. See you soon. Start again.
Willow, come. Sit. Sit. Willow, up. Say please. Say please. Willow, say please. Good girl. Willow, right paw. Good girl, high five. Good girl. Willow, sit. Down. Roll over. Bang! Bang! Wait. Willow. Gently. Gently. Up. Willow, catch. Sit. Willow, kiss. Sit. Sit. Willow, dance. 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 That's it. Spin. Catch. Kick. Sit. Catch. Sit. Willow. Cut.
Oh, you'll have to do that again. We're prepared for that one.
So sit. Willow, sit pretty. Willow, gently. Gently. Sit please. Good girl. All right paw. Good girl. High five. Good girl. Sit. Willow, hug. Willow, hug. Thank you. Sit. Catch. Sit. 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 Down. Wait. Bang! Wait. Willow, wait. Sit. Sit. Willow. Wait. Sit. Final trick. Come here. Be in room. Sit. Willow, sit pretty. Willow, wait. Willow, wait. 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 Wait.